We begin with our disclaimer here to remind you that past performance is no guarantee of future results. We're talking today about things that have been very, very successful for us in the past. But of course, because we're involved with the markets here, we have to remind you, as you no doubt well know, that you put money at risk when you put it in the markets. Today we're talking about planetary harmonics and the law of vibration in astro trading. And we want to welcome you to this session here today. So if you are looking for an extra edge in your personal trading, and if you want to know more about the hidden forces behind the movements of the markets, then you're in the right place. I'm TIMBOST with FinancialCyclesWeekly.com, and again, want to welcome you to this session here today. We've been publishing Financial Cycles Weekly newsletter since 1988, and continue to put that out on a regular basis via email. We began as a print publication a long time ago in the pre-internet days. But right now we're still publishing weekly, and we use a unique approach in our analysis and forecasting of the markets, and in our trading strategies. We refer to that as astro trading, and that's one of the things we're focusing on here today. So exactly what is astro trading? Well, we use a combination of factors and methodologies in our approach to astro trading. We combine fundamental analysis. We like to actually study what we're putting money into and what's behind all of that, with the earnings reports if we're dealing with corporations, and the fundamental market forces at work as well. We add to that, of course, technical analysis. We're very keen on being technicians and looking at the trends as revealed by the charting history of the entities that we're trading. We add to that, and this is what makes us unique, the astrological cycle analysis. So we combine our study of planetary cycles and their relationships to the markets, and all of these three together then give us what we call the astro trading advantage. And it has been an advantage for us over the years. We have tracked a model portfolio with this since 2002 and have not had any losing years. We pretty consistently outperform the markets. Of course, the Dow over that last 14 years or so has averaged about 5.33% return per year. The S&P a little over 7%. Our average return has been a little over 35% per year. Of course, some years are better than others, just like any kind of average, but that's why we call it the astro trading advantage. Now, here's how this approach works. What we have understood is that when we're dealing with this added dimension of the astrological cycle analysis, it gives us an advantage because of some very distinctive features that are there. Planetary cycles repeat themselves in a systematic, predictable fashion. They happen over and over and over again. The moon goes through its phases every month, and we can tell exactly when there's going to be a full moon and a new moon. The sun goes through all 360 degrees of the zodiac during the course of the year, 365 days, and that's a predictable cycle. Mercury has cycles, Jupiter and Saturn have cycles as well, and we can determine those in terms of where they were in the past, and we can look at them in the future as well, because the movements and the rhythms of the planets are really a demonstration of natural law. This is the way the universe is ordered. This is the way stuff works. And so we don't have to try to look for skewings of those cycles, or say, well, the moon was a little slower because of there were some civil disturbances going on, or this particular war caused Saturn to slow down, that kind of thing. So the movements of the planets, the rhythms of their cyclic interactions are predictable and demonstrable. So what we do then is examine the historical planetary cycles. We look back into the past and we look at what the markets were doing, or the specific market that we're interested in trading, in correlation with those particular planetary timings. And we look for patterns in those connections and in those relationships. And then based on this research, based on this backtesting that we do, we can then anticipate future movements and reversals in the markets. If we say that we've had a particular planetary phenomenon and we can track it over over the last 50 years, and it's occurred 15 times, and 10 of the 15 times, then the market has gone up that we're interested in, then we know we've got a 2/3 chance of the market going up the next time it happens. So that's basically what we're doing here. Now, some of the cycles that we track, some of the astro trading or planetary cycles that we take a look at are really very, very simple because we're just using one factor at a time. We look at one particular phenomenon in terms of planetary motion, and we look at those correlations, and then it's a very, very simple, straightforward kind of analysis. A good example of that is the solar cycle. The sun moves through all of the degrees of the zodiac once a year. This is the annual cycle. Anytime we see indications of seasonality in anything that we're considering trading, we're looking at the potential impact, at least, of the solar cycle. You have probably heard the old adage, sell in May and go away. This is something the old-timers in the stock market used to preach, and it still is current today. This notion that if you're in positions a little longer term in the markets, you can profit by simply going to cash around May and staying out of the markets for a few months before the inevitable rally starts again later in the year. And so certainly this has been a part of market wisdom for many, many years, and we can look at various charts that kind of demonstrate this. This is an average chart of the S&P in terms of its percentage of price movement over the months of the year. This is based, let's see, from 1990 to 2009, so we've got a 20-year period here. Of course, if we use a larger sample, we'll get slight deviations of the turning points, but essentially what we're looking at here, the sell in May phenomenon would have been a little bit premature based on these numbers here because the top came in right in early June, the first couple of days, trading days of June, and so if we had sold in May, we wouldn't have caught the exact high there, but it would have been a prudent move because after that, of course, a period of extended congestion for about 4 months leading into a dip in October, and October does prove to be one of the most treacherous months historically in the markets, and so we have that low in October. Now, we can look at this on the calendar basis and see that we have this duration of a 4-month period here in which we would want to be out of the markets if we were following the sell in May philosophy, but we can also note what was happening with the solar cycle in relationship to that. So every time we come to this particular point in early June, the sun, within a day or two, crosses the mark of 15 degrees of Gemini. And so this gives us a signpost on the way. Essentially, we are using the degrees of the zodiac as a measuring system. It identifies the progress of the planetary passages through different points in zodiacal longitude. So the sun was at 15 Gemini when it had been the peak and time to get out, and over here on the right we can see the sun at 15 degrees of Libra when the bottom was hit and it was time to re-enter the markets. So this is a very interesting correlation here because of these particular positions of the sun at these critical points in the sell in May cycle. Now, Gemini and Libra are two of the 3 signs of the zodiac which we are classified as air signs. We divide the 12 signs of the zodiac, which are like 12 inches along a ruler, with different designations. They are all either earth, air, fire, or water. And then based on this, we have 3 air signs. And it just so happens that 2 of these significant turning points for the sun, turning points in the markets based on the position of the sun, has the sun in 2 of the 3 air signs. Now, the 3rd air sign is Aquarius. So we can go back to our chart here for a moment. and look at the positions of the sun at 15 Gemini, 15 Libra, and we can add in 15 Aquarius, and that hits this point in early February, where we would also want to pay attention to a shorter-term inflection point in the markets on the average. So we get a little bit of resonance there as well. So this is the correlation then between that old adage of sell in May and go away with the solar cycle. We're using just one factor here, the passage of the sun through the zodiac, to coordinate it with our trading strategies here. So examining this single planetary cycle like this can give us some very, very solid information, lots of useful insights, and it can also help us connect with basic expressions of what we call the law of vibration. That is to say, the law of vibration is demonstrated intrinsically through the natural phenomenon of the motion of the planets, their interrelationships. They can be dealt with very, very simply, like the passage of the sun, or we can have more sophisticated expressions of that. Now, this phrase, the law of vibration, of course, comes primarily from the work of W.D. Gann. He certainly didn't invent the law of vibration. He noted that he discovered that, and in his notes he talks about discovering, I think it was August the 8th in 1908, that he understood for the first time how all this stuff actually fit together, and within a year was getting pretty phenomenal trading results on that basis, if we are to believe what he claimed was his process of discovery about that. And so the law of vibration is certainly a core concept if we want to be able to apply W.D. Gann's understanding of market dynamics. Now, there's a lot to explore in the law of vibration. We won't try to explain it all here today, but we want to point out that when we begin to work with planetary cycles of any sort, what we're doing is opening up the potential for a greater understanding of the workings of the law of vibration as we approach the markets. Now, we can do this, as we just pointed out, with the solar cycle, with one heavenly body at a time, but we can also work with planets in pairs. And our analysis becomes a lot more powerful when we do that. And that's really our point of focus for our time together here today. The power of using planets in pairs as opposed to looking at just one planetary cycle at a time. It's important to look at those individual cycles, but when we start working with planets in combination, we open up a much deeper understanding of the law of vibration and the harmonic resonances that actually move the markets from behind the scenes. It's the understanding of these patterns at work that enables us to make much more accurate forecasts and to be able to identify better trading opportunities. So as we start working with planets in pairs, there are several considerations that we want to keep in mind here, because there are different approaches that we can take to that study. And our approach here at FinancialCyclesWeekly.com is to combine a variety of approaches in trying to understand things. Ultimately, we rely on our back testing, but we also want to get this broader perspective to open up a richer understanding of the law of vibration and how it works with the market. So we can begin by investigating the symbolic significance of the planets themselves. Now, the planets have been around a long, long time, and because of that fact, there's a tremendous amount of literature and tradition about the planets and how they work and their potential influence on human affairs. Now, you can be a cultural historian and look at all of that, or you can treat it all as nonsense, but we want to at least acknowledge the fact that there are traditional understandings of the power of the planets, and they do seem to have predictable influences in certain ways. Without getting into the why all that is true end of things, we can simply observe the fact that that's there, pay attention to it, and kind of give it a nod and then move on. We can also, of course, examine the mathematical relationships between the planets and their connections at various times in their interlocking or overlaying cycles that occur. These will reveal the vibrational harmonics that can really propel our understanding of market dynamics in some pretty amazing ways. So when we start dealing with the mathematical connections, then we're taking a step away from the symbolic implications into a richer connection with the workings of the law of vibration, and we can begin to see the interconnectedness of pairs of planets in some interesting ways that reveal potential turning points in the markets at times that we may not anticipate otherwise. And then, of course, we can also do our back testing. We always do our empirical research as a part of this approach to the markets in order to discover the specific opportunities for trading. We can use the symbolic information, the mathematical analysis to help us determine the potential for movements in the markets and determine some of the patterns that appear to be there. But then once we've done that, we've developed a hypothesis that we go back and back test in order to determine what is the probability of something occurring at a specific time in the future, because our whole aim here is to give ourselves a trading edge. We want to have an extra advantage in order to reach some conclusions about what might give us good opportunities for trading ahead of time. So as we look then at planetary pairs and the combinations of planets, we can begin to refine this approach a great deal. We can not only look at the symbolic distinctions between two planets in a pair of planets, we can also look at their mathematical relationships, and then we can also add to that our back testing and research to come up with these specific opportunities. Now, when we look at planets in pairs, there's a rule of thumb that we like to apply here, a rule of thumb that we use pretty rigorously, not because it's the only way possible of combining things, but because it seems to work and it offers us clearer information more of the time. That is to say, we use one faster moving planet combined with one slower moving planet. Now, this is a matter of distinction, of course. The planets have varying speeds as they move through the zodiac and their apparent motion in the sky from our earthbound perspective here. So we've got the moon taking about 28, 29 days to move through all 360 degrees of the zodiac, so that cycle repeats on a monthly basis. The sun does the same thing in 365 days. The planet Saturn takes about 29 and a half years to do the same thing, and Pluto takes 248 years to do the same thing that the moon does in 28 days. So we have these levels of distinction in terms of the relative speed of the planets, and when we choose one faster moving one and one slower moving one, what we have discovered is that this gives us a pattern of harmonic resonance between those two planets that can help us identify potential turning points in the markets much more clearly, much more readily on that basis. Now, we could, of course, use two fast-moving planets or two slow-moving planets. Sometimes we'll take a look at that, but what we have found is that if we use one fast one and one slow one, then we get a much clearer indication of what's going on. So just to be clear about this, let's distinguish between the fast and slow-moving planets. If you're not familiar with this method of analysis, then it's useful to jot this down, pay attention to this, because we consider the fast planets the moon, the sun. Now, we recognize, of course, that the moon and the sun are not technically planets in terms of the terminology of our astronomical colleagues that look through the telescopes all the time, that we do, in fact, travel around the sun. We recognize that fact, but we're using the ancient terminology here of calling the sun and the moon planets as well as these other bodies. It's a convention that we use in astrology when we're talking about things from a geocentric or earthbound perspective. So we want to acknowledge that along the way, but we're talking about the moon taking 28 days, the sun taking 365 days. Mercury is fast, Venus is fast. The slowest of the fast planets in our configuration here is Mars. It takes about 2 years to make the passage around the sun and to move through all the degrees of the zodiac. The slower moving bodies that we're concerned with here are the outer planets. We go to Jupiter, that has a 12-year cycle. Saturn has a cycle of about 29 and a half years, 30 years. Uranus has an 84-year cycle. We have Neptune and Pluto. We have also listed here the trans-Neptunian factors. These are objects in space outside the orbit of Pluto. A lot of them are Kuiper belt objects, and the astronomers are discovering all kinds of other curious factors out there, and the astrologers are left trying to catch up a lot of times, trying to figure out, does this stuff have meaning, and if so, what is it? So we can factor those in as well if we want to extend our studies. They're called trans-Neptunian factors because they were first postulated. The astronomical community concluded that there must be stuff out there beyond the orbit of Neptune. This was prior to the discovery of Pluto in 1930, and they concluded that there would be other factors beyond Neptune, or trans-Neptunian factors, and so that's kind of a group name for a number of elements that we can sometimes include in our analysis. But let's take an example here, and let's try to make it a little bit simpler than that, and we're going to use one fast-moving planet and one slow-moving planet. We're going to combine Mercury and Neptune and talk about the potential for combinations there between Mercury and Neptune, and kind of walk through this process of analysis that we so often apply here at FinancialCyclesWeekly.com to our understanding of the astrological cycles at work that can apply to the markets. Now, we picked this combination here for a number of reasons. First of all, it is a fast-moving planet. Mercury is very fast. Neptune is much, much slower. But it's also part of the research that went into a book that we published in, I think it was 2012, called Mercury, Money, and the Markets. We did an extensive amount of research and analysis just of the cycles of Mercury. This is Profitable Planetary Cycles for Short-Term Astro Trading. And in this book, we do a detailed analysis not only of the Mercury-Neptune dynamics, but Mercury working with other slower planets as well, and talk about its impact on a number of markets around the world, its impact on some highly traded stocks, some blue chip stocks along the way, and it includes lots of reference material as well. So suggested reading, if you want to dig into this a little bit more deeply, it is available on Amazon, Mercury, Money, and the Markets. So let's talk about Mercury and Neptune. First of all, let's look at them from that symbolic or esoteric perspective here. What are the meanings of these planets in terms of the astrological tradition, and how does that apply to us in the markets today, if at all? So first of all, with Mercury, we're concerned with communication and transportation. You may have heard the term that Mercury was the messenger of the gods, and we have, of course, the symbol with the florists, the little picture of Mercury with the winged helmet and the winged shoes, ready to deliver flowers instantaneously. And so Mercury moves around a lot, and it is a very fast-moving planet, of course, but that's why part of the tradition and the culture around Mercury is all about the ability to communicate and to move stuff around. So it's the transfer of goods, the transfer of values, the transfer of ideas is really what Mercury is all about. It is intrinsically connected with the concept of commercial activity. So anytime questions about trade or commerce or litigation or whatever comes up, then Mercury's automatically involved here. And then as a subset of that, of course, it applies very specifically to trading and to our engagement with the markets as a whole, because Mercury is all about the exchange of ideas about what something is worth. So whenever we're in an auction situation or have an exchange going on and we're bidding back and forth with prices, this is definitely a Mercury activity. And of course, that's the core nature of the markets themselves. So this is one of the reasons why we wrote the book on Mercury, Money, and the Markets, because of this clarity of the connection with the traditional understanding of Mercury and with commercial activity and with the markets, and we wanted to dig into that empirically, and the book is a result of the back testing we did and the analysis, trying to figure out what those relationships actually are instead of simply relying on the tradition alone there. So we have these considerations about Mercury. When we look at Neptune, it's a different set of ideas. And in fact, grand ideas is the first thing put here for Neptune. It's about large-scale thinking and dreaming big dreams, so to speak. It is kind of the I have a dream notion of we can transform things, sometimes in very, very creative ways, but oftentimes Neptune is very clearly associated with confusing circumstances. That is to say, things get a little bit muddy along the way, and we have a grand plan, but we're not quite sure how it's going to work out. So we can have tremendous creative concepts. Neptune is all about fantasy and about imagining bigger and better outcomes. Sometimes it has a very strong spiritual orientation to it. I'm inspired to create something new and grand, and it will solve all of humanity's problems, but I'm not quite sure exactly what it is or how we're going to get the money for it or whatever the next step may be. So there's this vagueness about Neptune as well. It has a sense of unboundedness in terms of it, opening up all possibilities, but also unboundedness in terms of not being specific enough to really get concrete. So it's about fantasy. Oftentimes it's associated with very, very strong levels of speculation, and we want to bring things to higher results, whether they're built into the facts or not. And because of that, Neptune is also associated very frequently with outright duplicity. There's a kind of willingness with Neptune to tell lies, to deceive, to prevaricate in different ways, or to live in a state of illusion and either try to pull the wool over somebody else's eyes, or most often than not, it is self-deception, the refusal to see circumstances as they are and to deceive ourselves into believing that there's something there that maybe isn't really there. So that's what Neptune's all about, an interesting contrast to Mercury. So when we combine the two, we are contrasting the rational Mercury approach to business as usual. Let's take care of the paperwork. Let's manage the commercial activity here. Let's have an orderly trading system and clear the accounts at the end of the day, versus the Neptunian urge to speculative fantasy. If I'm thinking that I want to buy a very, very large position in this latest hot thing because it's likely to go to the moon, and I want to make sure I get in early to get the maximum advantage, what we're talking about is fantasy. Now, it may or may not pan out with any particular move that we make like that, but if I'm only thinking about the huge gains that I can make in the markets, then this is what triggers speculative activity, and it's not always well-grounded. It can also go to the opposite extreme. It can be apprehension that's really not based on facts. I just, the market doesn't feel right to me. I think I better sell off my position right now because I think the other shoe's going to drop and things, and we're overdue. We've got a crash coming. I just know it. And so that can be the other kind of Neptunian fantasy. It's almost a paranoid delusion at times. The bottom line here is that we're contrasting the ability to be rational in the markets versus our tendency toward distorted thinking. Now, the interesting thing about this is we point out this tension, this dynamic between the two, and actually for most of us as traders, this is what we go through every single day. As we're looking at the markets, I want to believe that I'm a rational trader, that I can stick to my trading plan and know exactly how to manage the risk involved in my positions so that I'm able to behave sanely. But all of a sudden there's a news bulletin or a flash, or the Fed makes an announcement, or whatever it is that happens, and the markets get a little chaotic, and I decide, I better jump out of this right away, or I better jump in right away, and Neptune has taken over. So we are constantly dealing with this contrast one way or another, and that's why it's interesting to look at this particular planetary combination. Now, we mentioned, of course, W.D. Gann and the law of vibration, and in talking about the law of vibration, again, was very, very clear that the bottom line here is mathematics, that the relationship of numerical dynamics are what are very important in understanding how the law of vibration works out. So we want to look at these numerical relationships, and we can apply that to the planets, to Mercury and Neptune, that we have chosen for our example here as a planetary pair with our methods of analysis here. So Mercury, we would first of all note, is the planet that's closest to the Sun. It's the first planet out from the Sun in terms of the arrangement of the solar system, and we go out to Neptune, which is the 8th planet out. So beyond that, we have Pluto, the trans-Neptunians, lots of other stuff out there, but we're very clear that Neptune is the 8th one out from Mercury, so there is an intrinsic 8th harmonic relationship between Mercury and Neptune that we want to pay attention to. We'll come back to this in a few minutes, but we just want to acknowledge that this factoring by 8 is very, very important as we connect the two planets. Now, when we talk about the 8th harmonic, maybe we should mention at this point here what we were referring to as harmonics. There's that multiplication by 8, but also division by 8. And, of course, as we look at harmonic relationships, what we're doing with the 8th harmonic is dividing the circle, the 360 degrees of a circle, by 8, which gives us 45-degree increments. And this is what we mean in terms of angular relationships. An 8th harmonic angular relationship is when two particular points are 45 degrees of arc apart from each other. So this is something that we give a lot of consideration to as we describe these harmonic dynamics, something to keep in mind here. Now, that's one of the first fundamental numerical dynamics between Mercury and Neptune that we can describe, but we can also look at their orbital periods. How long does it take Mercury to go around the Sun? How long does it take Neptune to do the same thing? So Mercury has an orbital period that's very, very fast, 88 days. It zips all the way around the Sun, so it's moving quite rapidly, quite close to the Sun. Neptune's a lot further away and takes a longer time to make that trek. In fact, 60,182 days. So this is an interesting dynamic here as well. Certainly, just comparing the scale of the two numbers, we get a sense of the relative speed of Mercury and of Neptune. But let's dig a little bit deeper here and look at the mathematics. If we take 60,182 days and divide it by 365 days, that is a year, we discover that Neptune's orbital period is roughly 164.8 years. A little over 164 years is the orbital period. And this orbital period of Neptune is also 164 times the 88-day period of Mercury's orbit. So it's an interesting contrast there between the two. Again, we're defining that level of scale, but as we look at this, the number 164 jumps out at us very, very strongly as we start to consider Neptune and the Neptune-Mercury relationship. There is a strong resonance between the two here, so we can conclude then that 164 is a key number in this relationship between Mercury and Neptune. Fairly straightforward kind of conclusion. So what do we know about 164? It's not a number that we bandy about or pay a lot of attention to, at least not in the literature that I've explored. So it's an interesting dynamic here to say, okay, what we've got is something that encapsulates 164. What does that mean anyway? Well, we begin to dig at the meaning by breaking down the number in various ways. First of all, the number 164 is the product of 19 multiplied by 36. So 19 times 36 is equal to 164. And so inherent in the nature of 164, we have 19 and 36. 19 is a prime number. That is to say, a prime number is one of those that can not only be evenly divided by itself and by the number 1. So there are relatively few of those, and the higher we get along the way in counting upwards with our numbers, the rarer they become. So 19 is an important number because it's a prime number. Obviously, 2 is a prime number, but after 2, then no even numbers are prime numbers. So after that particular point in the counting system, the only prime numbers, or all prime numbers, are odd numbers. Let's put it that way. And 19 is an example of this. So it's a powerful number in that regard. And of course, 36 is 6 times 6, or 6 squared, which is interesting in and of itself. So this is one system that we can use. 164 is 19 times 36. We can look at the significance of 19, and we can look at the significance of 36 in understanding the importance of 164. We can also use the technique that is conventional to numerology, which is simply to take the digits themselves and add them together. So we take 164 as 1 plus 6 plus 4, that equals 11, and in numerology we refer to 11 as a master number. It is one of those double numbers that we don't subdivide necessarily. So instead of saying 1 plus 1 then is 2, we're saying that 11 is a master number along with 22 and 33. In most numerological systems, that's as high as they go with the master numbers, the doubling of the digits there. But it is important in that regard because 11 is a different kind of resonant factor than either 19 or 36, but it is a master number in itself, and as such it has a particular level of significance that we want to be aware of. 11 is a blending number. It blends active and receptive energies, and as it does so, it resonates very strongly with the symbolic nature of Neptune itself. Now, the symbol for Neptune is a trident, that is to say, a crescent piercing across, so to speak. And with the symbol for Neptune, we have the interface or the interlocking of the receptive energies represented by the crescent with the material realm, the earth plane, and the grounding energies of matter represented by the cross. And so these blending of the symbols in the symbol for Neptune is an indication of its nature. It's all about blending active and receptive principles in some pretty dramatic ways here. And as we study astrological symbolism, there's a lot to ponder in that regard. At any rate, what we're seeing with 11 is a number of the combination of the receptive and active principles, so it resonates intrinsically with Neptune. So when we talk about 11, we're talking about a Neptunian kind of number, if you will. Now remember that we talked about this eighth harmonic connection between Neptune and Mercury, so let's take that 11 and multiply it by 8. So we get, of course, 88 as the product of that. So 11, Neptune, in the eighth harmonic is 88, which is also coincidentally, or maybe not coincidentally, the number of days in the orbital period of Mercury. So we've come full circle here. We've started by breaking down that relationship and getting us to the 164, and then coming right back to the 88 of the Mercury cycle itself. So 19 is also a number of great significance. Remember that we noted here that one way of getting to the 164 is multiplying 19 by 36, and we noted that 19 is a prime number. It's also what the ancients would call an incomposite number. This was ancient terminology for a number that could not be broken down, or a prime, essentially. The terms are synonymous, even though incomposite is not often used today. It's a little bit of an archaic term there. 19 is a number of transitions because it is a combination of the number 9 with that notion of the last digit in the sequence, with a 1 which is a new beginning, and so it is all about about a dynamic of change that's presaged by that. Now, this is of interest to us from our trading perspective because we're looking for the potential for trend reversals. And that's what we're looking for in the markets is when will it change? It's not just how high will it go, but when will it stop going higher, or when will it stop going lower if we're looking at it from the other direction. Now, the interesting thing about 19 as well is that it is the nearest integer, that is a whole number, to the number 18.97367. Now, 18.97367 is, of course, the square root of 360. I say, of course, I didn't know it until I took out a calculator and figured that out. But it wasn't one of those that happened to be floating around in my head. But at any rate, 19 is the number nearest to the square root of 360, and of course, 360 is symbolic of the circle. So when we're dealing with the square root of the number representing the circle, we are philosophically at least connecting with the concept of squaring the circle, one of those ancient philosophical conundrums that has puzzled geometers and market analysts for a long, long time. Anybody that's studied Gann certainly has encountered this notion as well. So then we also have, of course, with that 19 as a factor in 164, the number 36, which is 6 times 6, or 6 squared. Now, according to the ancient Pythagorean mathematicians, 6 was the only perfect number between 1 and 10. Perfect numbers are those that can be subdivided into parts, and then the parts add up to the number itself. So with 6, we can say 6 is 1. It can be divided evenly by 1. It can be divided evenly by 2. It can be divided evenly by 3, but not by 4 or 5. And so we add 1 plus 2 plus 3, and we get 6. So 6 is the sum of its parts, and the ancients would call this a perfect number. The only other perfect number, by the way, between 1 and 100 is the number 28. So that's something worth remembering as well. So 36, then, 6 times 6 can be considered the perfection of perfection. It is the squaring of the number that is a perfect number. So we've made the perfect even perfecter, or more perfect, as the case may be. And 36 also, of course, has some very, very strong connections with the work of W.D. Gann. If you've looked into Gann at all, you understand he spent a lot of time working with numerical relationships and astrological cycles, although he rarely talked publicly about astrology per se. His work is riddled with it. He, of course, referred a lot to the seasons of the year. The cardinal points of the zodiac were very, very important in Gann's work, and he would identify these points in which the sun would change seasons of the year. So we have the cardinal axis of the zodiac: 0 degrees of Aries, 0 degrees of Cancer, 0 degrees of Libra, 0 degrees of Capricorn. When the sun crosses those points, we mark those dates as the beginnings of the seasons of the year, with the solstices and equinoxes. So he was very fond of doing calculations on that basis. And of course, 36 is 4 times 9. Gann's work with the square of 9 is quite famous as well. This was one of his calculation methods that he used to determine the relationships of prices at seemingly disparate intervals in the market. So this was a very, very powerful tool that Gann used. He didn't invent it, but certainly refine the use of it a great deal. Now, we've mentioned, of course, Gann's work with the law of vibration. If you have not studied Gann, I would encourage you to do so. There's a lot of material out there, some of it very, very expensive, but some of it quite valuable as well in terms of the knowledge that it imparts. I recommend reading Gann himself, getting it from the horse's mouth, so to speak. We also have a little PDF that's a free download that It is at bit.ly/GANTime. That's capital G, capital T in that URL. It's case sensitive. If you go there, it will connect you with a free download of an extension of Gann's financial forecasting calendar that he used. He developed that in 1909, and what we've done is studied his work and used his methodology to extend that all the way through the end of the 21st century. So something that you might want to contemplate if you're, especially if you've not looked into Gann before, take a look at that. So let's look at some of the practical applications of these Mercury-Neptune dynamics. We have done a lot of speculation here about the symbolic implications, about the mathematical dynamics between the two planets, and in general, we can set up some guidelines for using Mercury-Neptune in our analysis of any market that we're interested in trading here. So we can look to start with for the cyclic patterns that relate to 6, 11, 19, 36, or 164 in various time frames. That is to say, we're going to look at 6-day cycles, 19-day cycles, or 36-week cycles, and so forth. So we can expand or contract the time frames, but we're going to look for these kinds of intervals. And whenever we spot this kind of interval with our cycle analysis of a particular market, we know we are resonating in some way with this Mercury-Neptune dynamic, and we might want to be taking a deeper look then at Mercury and Neptune. Now, also, based on the mathematical work that we just did, we're going to be paying close attention to the fourth harmonic, which is 90 degrees. We divide the circle by 4, we get 90 degrees there. The sixth harmonic, which is the 60-degree divisions. The eighth harmonic, we've already mentioned the 45-degree divisions, and the ninth harmonic as well. We divide 360 by 9, and we get 40-degree increments. So these become important angular relationships between Mercury and Neptune that we're wanting to take a look at, and then in other connotations as well. If we have a particular progression, let's say with Mercury at a certain point in the zodiac, when we see a market top, then where will the position be when Mercury has moved 60 degrees or 45 degrees away from that in the zodiac? So we can use this in a variety of ways as a tool for our analysis that's based on Mercury and Neptune. But we also want to remember that the strongest effects of the Mercury-Neptune dynamics don't always coincide with the expectations that we might normally have. We would ordinarily expect, for example, that the first harmonic alignment between the two, that is to say we have a conjunction of Mercury and Neptune at the same point simultaneously in the zodiac, that this would be hugely sensitive, and then the opposition with them exactly 180 degrees apart would also be very, very strong. Things don't always work out that way. As an example, let's take a look here at this chart for the S&P 500, and we've simply labeled here the points labeled A in this chart for the S&P are those points at which there was a Mercury-Neptune conjunction. The two were together at the same point in the zodiac. The points marked B were the times when they were in opposition to each other. And as you can see, it's not telling us a whole lot. we don't really see these as defining key turning points in the market in a significant way as we consider the S&P in this context. So that's something that we definitely want to be aware of there. And in fact, we have done this research with the S&P with this particular planetary pair. This is part of what's published in the book on Mercury, Money, and the Markets. And we've discovered that the highs in the S&P align with this fourth harmonic dynamic. When there's a 90-degree angle of separation between the two, the S&P is most likely to reach a high, and then the lows come in with an angle of separation of either 226 degrees or 293 degrees between these two planets. So it's different than what we might anticipate. And again, this is the value. We set up the expectations, we test the hypotheses, and then when we do the actual analysis and back testing, we reach conclusions about what we might be able to actually use in the markets. Here's the FTSE 100. And here we have marked, based on our analysis, these points with arrows which represent 141-degree angles between the two planets, between Mercury and Neptune. And what we have found is that this particular angular relationship between these two planets works about 74% of of the time to nail a tradable trend reversal in the FTSE 100. So we're going to be watching for this angular relationship to reoccur, and we can highlight those times then as trading opportunities. With the Sydney All Ordinaries, we can do exactly the same thing, but our backtesting there, our analysis of this particular market reveals that an angle of 199.5 degrees is really the active principle when we look at that particular market. And this is something that works about 72% of the time with the market in Australia. We go to India, we can go to Bombay and the Sensex index there, and again we can identify the specific Mercury Neptune relationship of being 280 degrees. And this is really an interesting study here because it has a phenomenal level of correlation. Whenever there's a 280 degree angle between Mercury and Neptune, the Sensex will reverse direction, hit a significant high or low 88% of the time. So it's a highly reliable indicator. Why? We're not sure, but I suspect here that we're looking at 280. We mentioned, of course, that the perfect number of 6 is one of them. The other one was 28. So this is 10 times 6, or 10 times 28. So we get that extension of this highly significant numerological connection here. And 280 is also the product of 7 times 40. So we get that 40 degree or 9th harmonic resonance coming in as well. So it just so happens in this case that it's very, very powerful with that particular market. Again, we base this just on our backtesting. This is what we've concluded here. When we look at gold and trading with gold, we can do exactly the same thing here. We've discovered there that a 293 degree angle is important with gold, and this is accurate about 70% of the time. So again, it's a tradable edge. We're going to be paying attention to that. Obviously, we're not going to trade on this basis alone, but when we can anticipate this, then it knows we know ahead of time that to look for other market signals that will confirm that. Finally, let's take a look here at the NASDAQ composite, and in the case of the NASDAQ, we've got a 65 degree angle between Mercury and Neptune that proves to be significant in our trading there. It will identify isolated trading lows more often than highs, although we can see with the arrows there some of those are highs. About 70% of the time it will hit an isolated low in the NASDAQ. So with these examples here, we wanted just to illustrate how this approach works. You can use careful backtesting and apply the same principles, the same kind of analysis with Mercury and Neptune to any market that you want to trade. The one caveat here, of course, is that you have sufficient trading history to go back and look at. So if you're interested in trading a stock that was an IPO about 3 months ago, then forget it in terms of this particular technique. But anything that you've got a decent amount of trading history, enough to be able to do some back testing with the planetary cycles, then we recommend that you do that. And of course, Astro Trading Advantage is not limited to just Mercury and Neptune either. You can use other combinations, and again, we recommend combining a fast planet with a slow planet. It can refine your understanding of the market dynamics. It can connect you with the law of vibration, and of course, you can discover more rewarding trading opportunities along the way. So in closing, let's talk a little bit about additional resources that you might want to check out if you want to extend your investigation of some of these ideas that we've mentioned here. Of course, we did mention earlier the book Mercury, Money, and the Markets. This is kind of the textbook in this area. It's available on Amazon. And of course, we also mentioned with our nod to W.D. Gann, the availability here of this expanded W.D. Gann financial timetable. That's a free download at bit.ly/Gann time, capital G, capital T. We have talked about our trading performance here over the last 14, 15 years at financialcyclesweekly.com, and you can find information at financialcyclesweekly.com. We encourage you to take a look there to see what we have available. We offer membership programs and so forth, as well as access to other training tools for astro traders. And we also have a new free service here that we're calling the Astro Trading Strategy Review. We encourage you to take a look at that. This gives you kind of a behind-the-scenes look at some of our sharing that we do with our members at financialcyclesweekly.com, talking about trading strategies. So this is available. Go to http bit.ly/AT strategy. Capital A, capital T, strategy is lowercase there. Again, this is one of those case-sensitive URLs that you'll want to use for that. So that's our Astro Trading Strategy Review. What we do is take our conference calls that we share with our Gold Plus Elite members and offer you a review of those calls after the fact. You don't get to use them ahead of time to plan the trading, but you can see exactly how we're applying these techniques in order to get these successful results. So this is TIMBOST with FinancialCyclesWeekly.com. Thanks for joining us today here for our investigation of planetary harmonics and the law of vibration in astro trading.